Well, it's our next to last show of 2023 because we will be back Sunday evening, New Year's Eve at 7:35 p.m. But we will talk about the closing out of this rather unusual year, and we're going to get into the short, medium, and long range because, like everything else in life, it's complicated. And we're not complicated. We're Joe Rayo and Joe Cioffi, and this is the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which, of course, as it is every night, brought to you by Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system, and you too can join the fastest-growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board, and it's also on the descriptor to this video. Use the coupon code if you decide to make a purchase, because a weather station would come in very handy. This one is easy. You just put two pieces together, and you're good to go. And the coupon code will save you how much, Joe Rayo?
It'll save you 10%, Joe.
And 10% is good. There we go.
It's good. It's good any way you slice it, yeah.
So I'm a little brighter tonight because I'm using a light. The problem is it's partially blinding me, so it's hard for me to see the map. So I'm going to be playing with this thing for a little while. Anyhow, welcome everybody to tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show. And welcome to everybody on the chat board. And for those of you who are not on the chat board but watching quietly in the background, we welcome you too. Hope you like the Joe and Joe Weather Show. As I said earlier, we're on Sunday through Thursdays at 7:35 p.m. and on the occasional Friday and Saturday when there's a storm around. And, well, make sure you turn your notifications on so you don't miss us. Hit the like button if you like the show, and hit the subscribe button, which is even better because then you'll be part of the Joe and Joe Weather family, either directly or indirectly. So, on that particular note, Mr. Rayo, I'm confused about a number of things, both in the short, medium, and long range. So why don't we take care of the short range first? Because once again, for the third system in a row, and the third one in about, 10 days?
Right.
Overperformed. There were areas on Long Island that got 3 inches plus. A lot of areas got between 2 and 3 inches.
I got 2.25.
Yeah, and that subtropical jet, once again, and you saw it last night on the satellite loop, how it never quite, thankfully, it never. Can you imagine if that upper low that was sitting, was kind of part of the broad circulation, but it was so far west, it really wasn't having a full impact. Can you imagine if that upper low was tucked in further east inside, where it would have pulled that whole subtropical jet right up the coast? I mean, we would have probably gotten double what actually fell.
It's been an incredible year. Somebody asked me how much rain has fallen so far this year. I could tell you, it is an interesting thing, Joe, and I complained about it in the summertime, so a lot of you remember that I have a weather station, and the tipping spoon for a few weeks during the summer was not properly functioning, so I was not getting any rain amounts for a few weeks, and then finally it corrected itself, and I started getting rain amounts again through the automatic rain gauge. And yet, if you look at how much rain has fallen in my area this year so far, something like 74 inches. And again, that doesn't include the 2 or 3 weeks where the tipping spoon was not working and I wasn't picking up additional rainfall to go on top of that 74. Now, that's an unofficial total, obviously, but it just goes to show you just how much rain has fallen so far in my area. And it's as you just said, Joe, or I just said, once again, today we had a system late last night, early this morning, that overperformed. 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, I was awakened by the rain pouring outside my window, and went from, I already had 0.48 inch of rain up until midnight. Then everything recycles and starts to zero again. But between 12 midnight and 2:30 this morning, I had already picked up an additional 1.5 inches of rain.
Wow.
I mean, and I just shook my head and I said, it's never going to end. It's never going. I don't understand what is going on, but it's just been nothing short of incredible in terms of precipitation this year.
It really has, and the year was a warm year. I don't know what it's going to finish in terms of how much above normal. Was it the warmest year on record? I don't know. I mean,
I mean, I didn't.
we
I
didn't
mean,
have.
didn't we go during? I mean, NOAA or the United Nations or whatever said that June was the hottest year on record. Then they said July was the hottest year on record.
Well, that
and they
was
said August was the hottest year on
well the
record.
hottest June, the hottest July, and hottest August for. I don't know if they were talking about the United States, or I know there were stories about the worldwide temperatures. I don't remember what the reference was, but I wonder if you combine the warm winter weather anomalies with everything else that the this year, um, in our area anyway, that it's going to finish out somewhere in the top 10 or the top 5. I don't know. Well, we'll have to wait and see when they start putting out some of the climo statements that they usually do at year end.
Right.
But warmer air holds more moisture, and I mean, it doesn't necessarily always go together that you get the moisture even when it is warm. But this year, I guess it was one of those years where the Jets sort of lined up a lot of the times where you brought in a ton of moisture from all sorts of places. So now we look ahead, and I'm very confused about a lot of things in the next over the next 2 weeks, and we're going to get to that. Just want to acknowledge Bobby Livingsworth hitting the tip jar tonight. Thank you, Bobby, and wishing happy holidays to you too. Happy New Year. Hope you had a Merry Christmas. And Frank Scalera, Happy New Year, Joe and Joe. Thank you for all the hard work you do. You guys are the best, and I appreciate everything you do for us, making this #1 weather show. Oh, I like that. #1 weather show. I mean, I don't know how many weather shows there are. We might be one of the few, but however many there are, if you say we're #1, darn it, the Frank Scalera rating service stands alone. And we thank you for the compliment. Most appreciated.
And Joseph Lepresti also hitting the tip jar as well.
Oh, thank you, Joe. Most appreciated also. Wonderful. All right, let's get going because we've got a lot to work to do and a lot of stuff to cover. Joe, if you could cover the super chats because my new light is blinding me to an extent. So,
David Fuller just hit the tip jar as well. Everybody's suddenly hitting the tip jar left and right.
Thank you.
In very rapid succession. It's coming. They're coming in as quickly as the rain did in my rain gauge last night, Joe.
Yes, most assuredly. Now, you see the flow out on the loop, on the satellite loop, is now shifted eastward, but going up from Cuba northeastward, up the Atlantic. And we do have a coastal low that is developed. And now you still have this upper low that's out to the west. Oh, great. Seriously? Joe, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. All right, folks. I just took like a very brief internet hit. So if we stop, that's what that is, and you should be getting us back within seconds. Okay, good. My screen is coming back. So what I was saying was that the subtropical and tropical feed is now shifted eastward, and it's wrapping into a coastal low that is just offshore. But if you look out to the west, and it's weakening, but we still have this sort of very broad upper air low feature that extends from the Great Lakes down to the lower Mississippi Valley. And that actually may bring some, they're going all crazy here, Joe, because,
going to start gassing up the snowblower. There's nothing in sight for the foreseeable future.
Yes, I would agree with that. I just want to go over a couple of things when we start talking about next week because there's a lot of uncertainty that's showing up, and I want to touch upon that. But in the meantime, we have to wait to clean houses. You got to wait to get this upper low out of the way. So it probably, as we mentioned yesterday, it's going to be Saturday when we'll probably start to see improvement. Although now it doesn't look like there's going to be much in the way of precip tomorrow.
Yeah, I in my Facebook forecast, I said, mist, drizzle, fog tonight into early tomorrow. Then that pretty much ends. And then The rest of the day, just a lot of clouds, maybe some breaks or pokes of sun late in the day tomorrow. But again, much of the day still clouded over, but the precip pretty well coming to an end. I'd say sometime between 6 and 9 in the morning. After that, it should be just basically dry, albeit cloudy.
Yeah, there's a couple of spotty showers in the Hudson Valley and in Connecticut and around New York City right now, and the radar's probably not picking up what's underneath the beam. So as you said, misty and so on. The steadier rain is up in Maine, and it's probably snow on the northern edge of this. You really have to struggle these days and for that. And we've got a few showers off the North Carolina coast. And the upper low to the west is producing actually a fairly large area of showers from southern Michigan to southern Wisconsin, back into eastern Iowa and Illinois. And there's also a little bit of snow in here in a few places. And we're going to see this thing, as I said, drift southeastward and weaken, but there might be just enough left of it tomorrow night and Saturday, so Saturday morning, so that the folks in the Blue Ridge Mountains down to about where I am, which is at the right in here. I'm somewhere right, trying to see where's that. I drew it right over the North Carolina state line, so I'm like right here. I can't even put a red X. Hold on a second. Let me clean this up. Um, so I'm about right there. A little bit further north than that, but that's where I am. And Atlanta's this little box down here, 100 miles to the south, west. So keep your fingers crossed, folks, because I'll get a coating of snow before most of you have. Meanwhile, in the northwest, we have some rain coming in there, and that's another in a series of weather systems coming into the western part of the United States. WPC on its rainfall forecast, precip forecast. This takes us through next Thursday evening, January 4th. And not much, but and of course some of this is left over from what's going on tonight and into Saturday. So for now, they're not showing, very much, but mostly under a tenth of an inch. More in Maine, of course, because of what's going on now, but much of the eastern United States quiet. Wet weather along the central Gulf Coast in Louisiana and into southeast Texas and eastward into, right along the immediate coast of Alabama and Mississippi and over into Florida. South Florida is actually dry the next 7 days. The plains are dry. We've got some light precip coming into the southwest and heavier precip up the west coast, particularly from coastal areas from Los Angeles all the way up the coast to northwestern California. Now, with regards to snow, not a whole lot here. This is this takes us to Sunday evening. What you see in West Virginia and down through the Blue Ridge are low chances of 2 inches. But we do have an area of 50% probability of 2 inches or more in West Virginia. Also, 50 to 70% probability up in central and northern Maine from the system right now. A little bit of activity in a small area on the Upper Peninsula bordering Wisconsin, and a little bit of leftover precip, a little bit of leftover snow possibilities. Again, minimal. We're talking about 1 to 10% chance for at least 2. And then we go to the Sierra Nevadas, where we have a higher probability, 80% or more, for at least 2. I'm going to put the 8-inch line in there and see what comes up. And about a 20 to 30% chance, and even a tiny area of 40% chance of at least 8. And going further north, there's nothing. Let me put the 2 back on to see if there's anything up in Washington State. Minimal chances through Sunday evening in the Cascades. So there you go. So I'm just out of curiosity, as we start looking at maps, what's your feeling about next week? Because let's go through the weekend. Once we improve on Saturday, Sunday looks okay. Monday, for the most part, looks okay. You're on board with that, correct?
Yes. In fact, I have just basically dry weather right on straight through after we get rid of the last of this precipitation I've got basically dry weather. I was debating whether or not I should throw in maybe a shower or something on Monday, and again another chance maybe on Thursday of next week, perhaps because of weak weather systems moving on by. But I kept it basically dry, mild, right on through Monday. I mean, the normal here in the Hudson Valley, normal high temperature at this time of the year now could be somewhere around 38, 39 degrees. Joe, I've got 50 for tomorrow, 45 for Saturday, 44 Sunday, 45 for Monday, and then a slow decline down into the low 40s, cooler but still above normal, right straight on through Thursday of next week.
And I think that makes sense. That we're going back to seasonal because there really isn't much in the way of cold air. There's, again, I keep referring it. I've been referring it to it as dirty cold air, and I think there'll be plenty of that. It's not. It's sort of low quality cold air. It's more cyclonic than it is anticyclonic or high pressure type cold air, which is usually dense and at the low levels and cold and real cold air that comes down from Canada. I'm curious and confused because the the ensembles, and this is the latest ensemble run for this is Thursday afternoon, Joe, and you'll notice that on this particular ensemble run, you've got a cluster of lows sitting just off the coast. And if you looked at today's European model, it actually brings. Let me just bring the European up, and you can see now the European does not delineate between this on tropical tidbits. It just shows precip amounts during during the periods. It doesn't show rain versus frozen, and it has a really fairly well developed low over the Florida Panhandle. It's 1,003-ish low there. You don't often see lows like that. We just saw one 2 weeks ago, of course, but this is a little different. But it's got 1,003 low there that it moves into South Carolina, and it actually pushes rain up the immediate coast to New Jersey, Long Island. Not like what we just had, but it does push precip up here, and that's the GFS. I'm sorry, that's the European. And if we look at the GFS on the 12Z or the 18Z run, like it did yesterday, it shows absolutely nothing. It all goes out underneath. You've got one system well, actually, if we go back, there's actually one before that. There's a system. This is the one with that upper low swinging by. I'm sorry. No, I take that back. This is the upper low swinging by, and I could put the frozen on this to make it a little easier to see where the snow is. It barely shows up. So look, if I get a snow shower out of this, I'll be happy. And then we got another weak low on Monday that goes out, and then we got another low on the GFS that you could barely find that goes out on Thursday, and then another one follows that on Saturday. So the operational runs of the GFS are in complete disagreement with what the ensembles have. So we have that, and the European is kind of with the ensembles. The Canadian is sort of with the GFS. So I'm really lost as to why the operational runs are doing this. I mean, usually there's something there, but in this case, there's not much of anything there. Where the models have those lows, where the ensembles have the lows all clustered.
Yeah, the Canadian model also is showing a storm down across the southeast, and it starts winding up after it gets its feet wet off of the mid-Atlantic coast, and really gets into a very potent mode. But again, well out to sea, away from us. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's off the map when it happens.
If you look at the upper air on the Canadian, it's a positively tilted trough that actually goes negative. But by that time, this would be for Tuesday night. By the time it does that and begins to kick in a negative fashion, the whole system is intensifying rapidly, but is well out to sea. So all three models, or the operational models, are showing that there is a sign that something is going to try to develop. And this, Joe, is probably due to why we've been hearing rumors on social media from a variety of different people over the last couple of days. Big snowstorm coming January 4th. January 4th looks like finally we're going to get something. Finally, So they've been looking at these models and they've been talking about this. And, as Alan Casper used to say, forecast with your head, not with your heart.
Right.
And this is one of those occasions where we've been in such a long drought with cold and snow that a lot of these people who want to see cold and want to see snow are just pinning all of their hopes on this system on the 4th of January, which, if you don't have your new calendar set up yet, January 4th will be next Thursday. So it's going to be interesting to watch and see how this pans out, or maybe I should say it'll be interesting to watch and see how this is going to disappoint.
Or evolve or devolve, one or the other. I got the European upper air. I mean, the European upper air for later next week, for Wednesday, Thursday into Friday. I mean, it's got two shortwave troughs that try to phase here as they move east. They remain sort of separate, but they get perilously close. And then here's another big difference, is the fact that the European's got a big upper low that drops southward into the Great Lakes right behind that for next weekend. I mean, that would certainly, I argue, for a colder air mass, maybe of higher quality, coming in after this system goes by on the 4th and 5th. But I'm sort of dubious. I mean, this European upper air today really shocked me in on the operational run.
It looks colder.
Yeah, I mean, the whole country is kind of under this rather cold flow across North America. Again, I'm confused because I don't know whether this is correct or not, but I do want to make a point, and I'm going to come back full screen for a minute. And Joe, you hear me out, and then tell me, if I'm going down the right track. Because there's been this conversation regarding climate change, and a few people have brought up the fact that they're seeing all these inconsistencies that have developed across the models amongst themselves on runs, and from run to run. We're seeing big inconsistencies in the long range in terms of how it's handling the overall pattern. And I would argue that this is actually a sign that. Oh, I'm glad you did this, because I have it. I also have it up on my screen. Um, I my thoughts on this are the fact that this is actually a sign that the pattern is changing. And you have to realize that when the pattern is changing, it's changing everywhere. It's not just changing over us. It's not just
Right.
changing over the east. It's changing over the east. It's changing over the west. It's changing in Canada. I mean, it's changing pretty much hemispherically when patterns change. And the thing is, when you're locked into a pattern, think back to last winter, okay? When you're locked into a pattern, yes, there are variations that occur as you go out further and further into the long range. But when you're locked into a pattern, you can figure out you could start to figure out in a fairly in time, maybe not right away, but the storms and the highs and the lows are all eventually going to behave in the way that the pattern that you have will dictate them to behave. But when everything is changing, the models themselves become highly volatile and start, they don't know. Is it this short wave? Is it that short wave? The change here is, how is that going to impact the change there? And multiply that over millions and millions of square miles, you get these model runs like we've been having, where they're incredibly inconsistent, and going in all sorts of different directions because they can't seem to get a handle on where we are actually going. Follow what I'm saying here? So the fact that the models are really diverse in what they're doing is telling you that the atmosphere is in that, now beginning that process, that grinding process of changing the pattern that can take sometimes a couple of weeks or more to play out. And in the playing out process, it gets very, very, very confusing and difficult to forecast much beyond the standard 5 or 6 day period.
Well, we have often mentioned Dr. Judah Cohen, who has been doing this now for probably as long as we have been doing it, Joe, looking at the various patterns and various weather. And over the last 2 or 3 years, on the chat board, especially, I will not mention names, but there are people on the chat board who have said, "Well, it's the last time I'm ever going to listen to Judah Cohen. He's been horrible. He's been terrible these last 2 3 years in terms of his forecasts, his predictions, and whatever. And he's doing bad again this year." But remember that Dr. Cohen, and certainly you and I, Joe, when we do this kind of stuff at night for our viewing public, but also for ourselves, we've been basing this on many, many, many years of empiricism. We've been used to seeing various patterns, and we've been used to seeing, oh, okay, well, I see what's coming our way, and you adjust things so that you make the assumption that, okay, we're going to get colder, or we're going to get warmer, or we're going to get more rain or more snow, or whatever. And as you have pointed out on more than one occasion, especially this year, Joe, these things are just not working out anymore. The rules have suddenly seemingly changed, and it's not just for you and I, but also for people like Dr. Cohen, I think. This is why Dr. Cohen has been having such a problem, still a dickens of a problem, in trying to nail down what is exactly going to happen in the future, because we have not seen things like this in recent years. And maybe, just maybe, this is pointing to a change in the overall patterns that we have become so accustomed to over a good part of our forecasting lives. And that's what's making it very tough to try to, I say that. See, and somebody just now, again, I will not mention names, but somebody on the chat board, I've lost all faith in the man, Judah Cohen.
Why? Because he's wrong.
What have I been saying? What have I been saying for the past 2 or 3 years? Not just Dr. Cohen, but myself, Joe, and I'm sure other forecasters. Big Joe B, for example. I'm not going to mention a full name there. I mean, they have been making.
As long as you're not mentioning names, Joe, but go on.
But we've all been making these forecasts and everything, and then sitting here and watching them not happen, not transpire the way we thought that they should. And look at this. I mean, as I just said, we've just seen like the second or third coastal system overperform from what the models were suggesting.
And by the way, you and I caught all three of them. We said, well, for all three, they would overperform.
Yeah, well, Tom Contino says we'd like to see Paul Cosin brought in. What is he seeing? I don't know.
But what does it But what does it matter what he's saying if he's subject to the same variabilities everybody else is?
Yeah.
And besides, if he came on and said, if we brought somebody, if we brought any a reputable forecaster, we don't have to, let's point to anyone specifically, but if we brought on a reputable forecaster, Joe, that would say something that a lot of people, let's be honest now, a lot of people will not want to hear, okay, you'll criticize him for it.
Right.
And the thing that gets me about it is, if you're going to criticize somebody about their forecast, you can do that, but it might be a good idea to sort of wait till after the forecast has played itself through before you throw the criticism out, okay? Rather than just like automatically reflex. You got to give people, they have to give people latitude. And also, with respect to Dr. Cohen, who I have a tremendous amount of respect for, let me make that clear. I love to have him on the show. We've had him on before. He's dealing with something that is so above what you and I do. I look at sometimes when I look at some posts from some of these, a lot of these reputable forecasters who spend their time trying to figure out what's going on way up at 10 millibars, all the way up in the stratosphere. I don't understand half the crap. I really don't. It's above my pay grade. We didn't really go into all of that when we went to school. It was a very, very minimal amount of science that was covered at those levels because, back in the 70s and even into the 80s, it was still kind of coming out of that primitive era, if you want to call it that. But the point is, it's like my point here is that this stuff is hard. It ain't easy. Believe me. If it were
Right.
easy, we wouldn't have this show.
And even the models, even the models. I mean, you talk about the 10 millibar. 2 days ago, what was I looking when I was looking at the 10 millibar? It showed the polar vortex stretching out, actually breaking in two, and actually showing a second feature moving across Hudson Bay. I just took a look at the 10 millibar from earlier today, and what happened? It gets very elongated, but no longer is it showing two separate entities, and in
Well,
fact, it's
actually, there was one run that you could see today. All of a sudden now, so there's apparently two. If these models are correct, and we don't know that they are, um, there are two stratospheric warming events that are going to occur. So initially, the model took the first one and made it just this one gigantic stratospheric warming event and tried to split those two. Then all of a sudden, a couple of days ago, it was completely gone. Rotated the vortex back up to Siberia. Now, what it's doing is it's trying to do that rotation, but instead of rotating it up, it kind of gets stuck between Greenland and Siberia there, and starts to stretch out, and you could see the warming that's coming in from Asia around the other side, and it looks like it wants to split then, but the split comes later. I think what's going on up there right now is kind of separate from what's going on downstairs. I want to make that distinction. I don't think we need to rely on what the stratosphere is doing at the moment with regards to what's going on in the bottom of the atmosphere, because the bottom of the atmosphere seems to be in its own, doing its own thing, while the top of the atmosphere is doing its own thing. Now, whether they couple or not, which is something I try to always point out, that what's going up there has to couple with what's going on downstairs, and sometimes it doesn't. So, that's a variable here. We could have everything happen the way you want it to happen up at that level, but if it doesn't couple with the lower level, who cares? So, but the point, all of this leads to the fact that people are getting. I think people are overly frustrated. Snow lovers, winter weather lovers specifically, are overly frustrated over last winter, and they're now getting beyond frustrated. They're getting angry over the fact that there's been no snow. But you've got a map, and I saw this today, and Fled Weather, who's on the chat board somewhere, that pointed this out to me. But you've got a map to show tonight, so that you're sharing it on the screen now. So we might as well go into this and make it even more confusing.
Well, this is the Climate Prediction Center. Every day, well, not every day, Monday through Friday, they issue the risk for heavy precipitation or heavy or unusual weather events. This is the heavy precipitation risk valid from January 5th through January 11th. And what they have here is a slight risk of heavy precipitation running all the way from the Gulf Coast all the way up right on through the entire Atlantic seaboard. I mean, there you go. It's if you're looking for more precip, and I'm sure all of you have not had your fair share. All of you have certainly had not enough, he says in a somewhat sarcastic vein. The Climate Prediction Center is suggesting that during this period from the 5th to the 11th, there may be more heavy precipitation affecting parts of the Atlantic seaboard. And in fact, the greatest risk is down right near the central and eastern Gulf Coast. A moderate risk, which encompasses portions of Alabama, Mississippi, a small chunk of Louisiana, northern and central Florida, southern sections of Georgia. This is where probably there's a greater risk around the 5th and 6th, actually. That may be that system that we've been watching, Joe, that some of the models have been, oh, come on, give me a break. It just went into a commercial for the Shriners. I have to.
Oh, don't worry about what's going on the screen. Just keep talking.
1, 0. Well, I can't see. I'm trying to
point.
Oh,
okay.
I'm trying to point to. I'm working off of the YouTube here to make things a little easier for me. Anyway, so you've got this area here. I understand, because now it's not. It would not show up if my cursor would not show up on the YouTube, obviously. So right down here is where that storm that we spoke of about 5 or 10 minutes ago is indicating the greatest threat or the greatest risk, a moderate risk from the 5th and the 6th of January. And then as the system moves northward, north and eastward along the Atlantic seaboard, maybe going all the way out to the 11th of January, from the rock-bound coast of Maine all the way down to northern Florida, you've got that area of potential heavy precipitation. Now, let me just this is liquid precipitation. Now, here's something that's going to have all of you snow lovers salivating. You ready for this? Look at this. Risk of heavy snow, which starts somewhere in western North Carolina and then continues in the higher terrain areas of western central Virginia, western Maryland, and then actually comes within a hairbreadth of the New York City metropolitan area, up into the Hudson Valley. The risk, slight as it is, for heavy snow, January 6th, January 7th. Will that happen? Could it happen? Well, it could. I guess it's all going to be dependent upon, again, that storm that we spoke of again 5 or 10 minutes ago, the track and how much cold air is pouring in behind it to produce that. But, Joe, there is that possibility, at least according to the Climate Prediction Center, that there may be a narrow region of possible heavy snow come mid or late week next week.
Well, I have, because I think it's important that we look at this as soon as I can. I've got, with the new light, I'm having a tough time seeing this. So just to match this up, so I'm trying to get to, so this would be one. Okay, I'm just, hold on a second. I just want to make sure I got the right time frames here. So this would be, I need to look at the 168. I'm going to put this up just a moment. I just want to make sure I got the right precip time. So it's 168 and 174 off so it's one, right, so 168 on the we're going to use the GFS ensembles with this. So just give me a second here. So here's the 850. Okay, so we're talking, well, here's what the European looks like for next Thursday. Okay, with this low that develops and is right along, moves across. And by the way, I'm going to show you another map that's going to make you really salivate. But there's your low near South Carolina, and then moves out offshore. Again, the ensembles seem to have it clustered on the GFS now. The ensembles, not the operational. The ensembles have it clustered off the New Jersey coast. So here's this is the 850. So we're at just under 5,000 feet for the time frame for that European. I'm going to try to match it up as best I can. So this is matched up with that map with the precip coming up. So the zero line, the zero is where the blue ends. So if you want to believe this, according to, again, that was the European. This is the GFS ensemble, Joe, for Thursday. It's got the zero line, off Long Island, right along coastal South Jersey, down into southern Delaware. I mean, it's not overly cold, but you don't have to go too far to find, 850 temperatures. All around New York City, the 850 temperature here is -2, okay? A -1, -1. Now, remember, the bottom part of the atmosphere might still be too warm. So it's quite possible that, yeah, you look at the 850 and you say, okay, well, that's snow. But if the bottom part of the atmosphere is sitting in the upper 30s to low 40s, and you're not getting vertical motions, you're not getting intensities, you're not getting all those things that could cool that bottom column of the atmosphere, doesn't matter. So right now, I would probably lean against frozen precipitation at the coast, but I certainly could see the possibilities. Again, if this is correct, if these models that are seemingly very confused about this storm system are correct with what the higher levels are going to look like. So this matches up, and I will also show you. I'm going to show you the European from earlier today for snowfall. Okay, I'm not big on snowfall forecast maps. They're fun to look at, but in the longer range, they're not the most useful tool in the world.
Get on board, Joe. I mean, up here, of course, you're not in the New York metropolitan area, but I know of at least one, and even a couple of local TV weathercasters who will go out on a limb and show you the European snowfall map for 7 days in advance, 5, 6, 7 days, and they'll say, "Well, here's what it looks like," and we'll keep, why bother? But
Yeah,
I guess,
but I want to show this because I want this to happen because it's all about me. Okay,
yeah.
this is
All
all
right.
this is all about me. Um, but here is this is the local maps on Pivotal, and this was off the European for next week. As soon as it's done loading, you'll see what I get.
Well, you see,
And
this is probably what they looked at CPC, Climate Prediction Center, and this is why they probably said, all right, let's put a slight chance of some significant snow and the very places that you can see on the map that you're just showing here.
well, it gives me six. It gives me six, Joe. Six
Okay.
inches. Okay, I just wanted to put that up there because it's not often that I see numbers like that. I mean, they do in a long range. It does show up from time to time, but uh, this is a week from now, so I can only hope that that I even get a quarter of that. I would be happy. I'd be happy with an inch or two if this wind up verifying. And if we look, and you're right, CPC probably looked at the European when they were constructing all this and saw the chances off the 12Z run. And if I just go to the regional shot, you can see it a little bit wider, and you'll see that how they got to what they got, 168. And as soon as it loads, you'll see it. And yeah, I mean they actually have it further east as far as the snowfall. They have the easternmost line going touching northwest New Jersey, but you can see it's pretty much up the Appalachians into central and western PA and to upstate New York with the heaviest stuff in the Appalachians. And you would expect that since it's more of a southern system than anything else. So you have that. Um, again, it's 7 days out. Who knows? We still have to decide whether the operational of the GFS is correct and the Canadian is correct, or is it the European? And is it the ensembles? Because the ensembles of those models are bullish. So what do you do?
I don't know. Tom Contino, by the way, about 5 or 10 minutes ago on the chat board was asking about the Lindsay snowstorm. And he said, did they have any computer models available at the time of the Lindsay? And they were talking about 1969.
Did
Now,
they have the barotropic then?
you mean the bustotropic?
Yeah.
I was going to use the analogy that if they had any kind of computer power or computing power back then in 1969, it would be the equivalent of comparing what we are using today to a TRS 80 from Radio Shack.
Oh, not even.
I mean, yeah, not
Not
even
even.
back then.
And the
A
amount
lot
of memory that computer had, you'd have to be the size of the Empire State Building.
I mean, like Tom and anybody else back then, it was still basically you're plotting every 3 hours, doing extrapolation, looking at the map. You're really looking at the map. And I got to tell you something: forecasters back then had a much greater feel for weather as opposed to forecasters of today, because the forecasters of today, all they're doing is just. And I admit, unfortunately, that I have, and I'm sure you have too, Joe. I mean, I can't even remember when I sat down and did a sectional off of, let's say, data from circuit A.
No, because it's done for you. It's done for you if you want a surface map.
Right,
And the thing is, forecasters don't always, these days don't have time to do that. The ones that are working professionally, because in this world we live in, they're doing so many other things now
right.
that the automated stuff gets, all those other things that you had to do by hand that would take. I mean, it would take you like an hour and a half to plot a sectional of the eastern part of the United States. Although Tom Morgan had it down to a science, he used to forecaster in the New York office could plot a sectional in like 30 minutes and get the whole East Coast done, up and
Pete,
down, isobars and all.
Pete Bergman, our mutual friend, who I went to City College with, here in New York. He could do it in 45 minutes, and he was like right behind Tom Morgan. He got the obs down, and he could do the isobars. I said, "How do you do this so quick?" It took me at least an hour and a half to 2 hours, and by the time I
By
was done,
the time you were done, it was already 4-hour-old information.
right, it was time to do another.
It was time to do another one.
But I mean, it. As I said, as you plotted, you could actually see what was going on, and you had a better idea, better feel. And I'll tell you, during big storms, when you see pressure falling rapidly at a number of different places, that started the juices,
Yeah.
the adrenaline going, because you're like, here it comes. I remember in particular the President's Day storm in 1979. I'm in the back room trying to get some sleep after working 12 hours, and Andy Gregorio, another mutual friend of ours, he's plotting, and every like 2 minutes he's saying, "Holy blank, holy blank." I'm saying, what the hell is going on out there?
Right.
Well,
And that's because it happened so infrequently. When you would do it in the 2000s, you'd be not again, not again, not again. you know,
So
I'm not even going to, at this point, it's almost pointless to go through the long range, because the next run's going to be totally different, and we might as well just wait till Sunday to get some sort of clarity. I think we need to get some sort of clarity. I'm probably gonna, tomorrow morning I might mention that there's a chance for something on Thursday. I don't know if I'll probably just put rain with maybe a mention that there could be some snow well inland. I think that's the best that you could probably do based on what you have now. If we start to see, I like to see the GFS come into what the ensembles are doing, or maybe the ensembles will go the other way to overnight, which at least will settle the question and make us we could put it to bed and to a certain extent, and then just kind of say, okay, we really don't have to worry too much about this. But um, CPC doesn't put that stuff up lightly. And by the way, we should mention also that your point about how things were years ago, and the question about the Lindsay snowstorm. In those days, you didn't really forecast much beyond the five. You had a 5-day period. That was it. And the 5-day forecast was, really not very good on days 4 and 5 at the time, because you just didn't have the tools to do it. So over the years, as we've got more and more tools and more models and better satellites, more and more satellites, um, more and more radars, more and more observations. So now suddenly you're able to develop models that can go out 7 days, 10 days, 16 days, 35 days. Okay? Not that they're necessarily accurate, but the thing is, if you've got a tool for it, there's also a market for it. So now you're doing work for people who would be interested in something, a general outlook for a week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year. Okay? And all of that requires work, and you've got fewer and fewer people that are doing this work. And a lot of the stuff that's done is also now being done automated, by computer. Soon some of it'll start being done by AI. So, and it already has, I'm sure, somewhere. So, it's daunting and it's overwhelming for folks like us, because we're trying to just get by, short, and then maybe opine on the medium range and the longer range. That's all we can do. I mean, but with all these, there's so much out there now for people, all these tools that they have, and so much more science than what we had. That and everybody's, people crave, people that are into the weather enthusiasts all crave for all this stuff.
If you're a fan of the TV show MASH, let me put the two of us in the same position as Colonel Potter, who was played by the great Harry Morgan. There was one particular episode where somebody had come to the MASH unit to explain about what the North Koreans and the Chinese were using now in their effort to kill more people. And while he's explaining, going through all of this, Hawkeye and BJ are cracking jokes. And finally, Colonel Potter, who's been in the armed services since World War One, suddenly blows his top at BJ and Hawkeye and starts screaming, I want to learn how to use this kind of stuff. I want to learn what's going on with this. I'm going to, you know, he's desperate to try to stay abreast of what is going on with the new technology. And sometimes I feel like Harry Morgan. So, I mean, there's so much of this stuff. And this is what I feel sometimes when I read what Dr. Cohen is writing on his tweets, on his blogs. There's some of the stuff I really don't understand, but I'm trying to understand.
Yeah.
And you know, you get so frustrated. You know, I need to know this. I need to learn how to, you know, and everything is coming at you fast and furiously.
Right. There's one graphic that I keep seeing. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's just like this graph, and it's got 5 million blue lines all going in all sorts of directions. Most of them are going in one direction.
I saw that.
And I'm trying, and I don't even know what those lines mean. And I'm trying to read what those lines, you know, I'm reading, I'm trying to understand what those lines mean. I have no clue. None. None. It's like, what is this? All I say is when I look at it, I say, okay, they're telling me that this is bullish. I'm just going to go with that. Just leave it there.
But you see, going back to the MASH analogy, Harry Morgan was an old school surgeon.
Right.
It's like you and I have been our old school meteorologists. You know, a couple of years ago, I posted a snow map, and I used one of the maps I used to plot sectionals on, and what I heard in the aftermath was that, like, what the heck is this? Where's all the colors? Where's all the computer generated stuff? And somebody said, you got to understand, Rayo's an old school guy. Yeah, I'm an old school guy, and I'm trying to stay abreast or staying on top with the latest technology. But this is how I learned, and this is how I got into this sort of thing. And you got the kids who are coming out of college now who didn't have to deal with plotting sectionals and whatever. I kid Renata sometimes. Renata also, by the way, I don't know how many of you are aware of this. My wife is also a meteorologist, and we worked at the same weather service office for a good number of years. Back in the day, Joe, you may remember this too, back in the late 70s, early 80s, when a radar came out, we looked first at the teleprinter, and the teleprinters used to print out a bunch of numbers, 1s and 2s and 3s and 4s and 5. And then what Renata did, because she was like the expert on doing this, she'd take a plastic sheet with a grid on it, and she would plot using a grease pencil where the 1s and 2s and 3s and whatever are. So this is how we found out where the areas of precipitation were and where embedded in that area the heaviest amount of rain was occurring. We would sometimes refer to thunderstorms. She'd say to me, says, Joe, look at this. We have a level 5 thunderstorm, a line of like a squall line. You show like 4s and 5s. This is before color radar, folks. Right. This is before the stuff that you see routinely on television right now. This is what we had to do. This was old school. We don't do that anymore. I couldn't do it now if my life depended upon it, because I've been so used now to the technological part of the equation. Joe, remember, I don't know about you, I remember Stan Getzelman's class having to plot an adiabatic lapse chart. I mean, I can with the TTAAs and the TTBBs.
Oh, I remember, and it was, you know, it wasn't easy. And we wasn't easy, and nobody does it. You know, I don't know anybody that does it by hand anymore. And it's been years since anybody done it by hand. Plus the fact that with what we do now and what we have been doing, because when we worked in television, there was really no need for us to do, because our jobs really was to take the information and present it.
It was
and make it look interesting.
I mean, you had to, you know, meatball surgery on MASH. You had to get it done really fast, and basically, what we had to do on television was meatball meteorology, because the people who were in charge, the executive producers and the directors and everything else, they pile so much on us. Look, I need to know this and that. I also want a map for this and that, and bum, bum, bum. And you say to yourself, holy mackerel, and you see a whole pile of stuff that you had to get done by 5 o'clock, by the 5 o'clock show, because as it turns out, you were leading off at 5 o'clock to tell everybody about the big storm. There was no way that I could do what I used to do, you know, back in the beginning, just sitting there and leisurely plotting and looking and watching the teletype and everything. Couldn't do that. You had to do boom, 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 boom. And let me tell you, if you weren't fast enough, and if you're too slow and you didn't have what you had to show, you weren't going to last very long.
All right.
Joe and I lasted a good number of years because we learned how to step it up, so to speak, on television.
And we won't even discuss makeup.
That's right. Absolutely true. Well, I had a makeup lady.
Oh, so did I did too when I worked at Pix.
No, well, I'm not. My makeup lady took care of me at home.
Oh no. I had we had a makeup person at Pix.
Oh.
That was actually the best time of the night because I would go. My makeup time was to go in at 9 o'clock for the 10 o'clock show. I would go in at 9 o'clock. She'd be doing my makeup. We'd be watching The Sopranos. So while she was doing my makeup, it was great. It's I had a lot of fun. Uh, I had a lot of fun when I worked at Pix. I have to admit, it really was a great place to work. So that was my dream time. Anthony Sparacchio banged the tip jar. I didn't see anybody else in between, so hopefully I didn't miss anybody. But Anthony Sparacchio bangs the tip jar with a Happy New Year to us and a Happy New Year to you and to Trish, who banged the tip jar last night. Thank you both. You have Briller Jeopardy tonight?
Yes, I do. Or as Mr. O'Toole on Treasure Island used to say on that game show back in the 70s, yes, I do. I wish I had a $25,000 certified check to give everybody, but I don't have that. Let me get tonight's Briller Jeopardy up on the board here. And tonight's no, wait a minute, that's not what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the wrong one. Here we go. On this Briller Jeopardy, we are discussing weather extremes in Central Park in January. We're not even into January yet, but the chairman has already gotten into January weather, so we'll get into it. This is Central Park weather extremes in January. Highest temperature in the month of January at Central Park.
I'm thinking back to a New Year's Day, the 70s. Not sure. It had to be in the 60s. So at least in the 60s. I will say, I don't I think that there was a 70 though. You know what? I'll take a shot. I'll just say 70 even.
Okay, well, you say 70. And let's take a look.
David Fuller 72.
Congratulations, David Fuller.
Okay, I was in the right place.
Ellen Bertona was one off at 73, but 72, the highest temperature recorded at Central Park, January 6th. You said it was the 1960s, Joe?
No, I thought maybe in the early 70s.
Early 70s. I tried 2007.
Oh, okay, well maybe it could have been. I didn't remember that one, but I did remember one as a kid after a big rainstorm on New Year's Eve, and then it was like windy and really warm on New Year's Day, and we were out there no jacket on, just a short sleeve shirt, and I remember my mother hanging clothes because it was such a strong warm wind that everything would dry fast.
One of the things that I did not like to do, and one year I got roped into it, I know you did it a number of times at Pix, was work New Year's Eve.
I loved it. I loved working New Year's Eve.
But with you could be on the road by midnight or before midnight.
I usually was, unless I was working New Year's Day, which sometimes I did, and then I would work New Year's Eve. I would get in like at 7 o'clock because we only had the one show. So I do the show at 10 o'clock, go next door to the really ritzy hotel and get about 4 or 5 hours sleep, and then come back at 4:30 for the morning show, and then and get paid for 2 shifts.
Right.
So which I always liked.
Lovely. I was on News 12 Long Island. I found myself on one New Year's Eve, and it was Bill Zimmerman was the anchor. He got roped into doing that show. And Nicole Nogood, who later on became Nicole Bell, and sadly she passed away a few years later. Any case, when it came time to throw to me to do the weather, again, this is New Year's Eve. We're coming up on midnight. I looked straight into the camera and I said, if any of you out there are watching me right now, it probably means your New Year's Eve party was a flop.
Right. Bill Zimmerman passed away, a couple of weeks ago.
Really? I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I think
Oh,
it was 2 weeks ago. I don't think it was last week. I think it was 2 weeks ago.
Bill was a
Very
professional
sad. Very nice man.
ABC, and he was on CNN. Although he glared at me when I said that. I only mention that because that was also an unusually mild New Year's Eve night. It was like in the 60s.
Right.
But Bill was playing it straight down the middle and trying to be as professional as possible. And here I was telling people basically what everybody knew, that if you were watching the news coming up on midnight, well, what are you doing New Year's Eve? Oh, I'm watching News 12.
Right.
Anyway,
Next question.
Excuse me.
Next question.
Next question. I think Mr. Briller got things a little mixed up here. Lowest temperature in January at Central Park. He gives me a temperature, but he gives me a date which could not possibly be the actual date in question. In fact, I'll tell you the date he gave me. February 9th. Now we're doing January.
Right.
Scott, if you're watching, February 9th, 1934. Well, February 9th, 1934 happened to be the date of the coldest temperature ever.
Minus 15.
Minus 15. But he does give a temperature for January.
He gives a temperature for January, but doesn't tell you the year. Okay. I'm going to say, all right, there's two numbers that pop into my head. Minus 7 and minus 13.
Okay, well,
and
minus 13, that's too cold.
All right, so I'll say minus 7.
And minus 7, if it were Snake, it would have bit you, Joe. But before you even have a chance to make a correction, Rich Rothmansky, minus 6.
Minus 6, okay.
I have no idea what date it was or what year it was, but minus.
Was it maybe 19? What was it? That 1917? What is it? Was it they had the 3 days in a row where it was below zero?
Late December, early January, 1916-17. It was like frigidly cold.
Brutal. Yeah. Okay.
Daily cold maximum in what is that? Daily cold maximum in January.
The lowest high.
The lowest high.
The lowest high temperature for a given day. Okay. I mean, that's what that is.
Well, he didn't give me. Okay. He did give me a number. All right.
I'm trying to think.
He gave me a number and a year.
I always, it was always seemed to be a big deal surrounding the fact that when we did get cold like that, whether it would break 10. Okay. So I'm going to say the lowest maximum. I'm going to take a shot here. I'll say 4.
Well, very close. It was indeed a single temperature, but it was not 4. That's a little bit too cold. And Rich Rosmansky, he said, I just looked it up. See, don't do that. You're not supposed to cheat like that.
All right.
Mark Franz, you're very, very, very close with 7.
So then it's 8.
Or
6.
6. There you go. 1882, 6 degrees.
Okay.
Most snow in the month of January at Central Park.
30. It's it's within the last 20 years. 31.
Not enough, Joe.
Yeah, no, it was 30. 33.
Still not enough, believe it or not.
35.
Still not enough, Joe.
Really? 36.
36, yes. In 2011. I think that was the Snowmageddon year. Was that the Snowmageddon?
No, the Snowmageddon year was 2013.
2013. All right.
February of 2013.
Last one, and I know you remember this. I certainly remember it. Biggest snowstorm in January at Central Park.
Well, that was the one from the El Nino, the 2016.
Right.
I forgot the date. It was 27. Was it 27.2, 27.3, 27.5? Right,
Right.
because the old 24-hour record was 27.4, and somehow somebody found a tenth of an inch. Because it was sitting at 27.4, and they needed a tenth of an inch to break a record, and somebody somehow found that tenth of an inch. Maybe on some car top on Rockefeller Center that they found that tenth of an inch. I don't know. Just checking. Just
I,
saying. It's an old
and that's
joke about car tops, folks. We've covered that
it.
numerous
Right.
times. All right, let's wrap it up here. It's 8:45 Eastern Time on this Thursday, the 28th of December. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Joe knows who hit Super Chat tonight. Do you not, Mr. Rayo?
We had on Super Chat tonight Bobby Livingsworth, Frank Scalera, Joseph Lopresti, David Fuller, David Scott, and Anthony Spiraccio. And we thank one and all for your contributions tonight.
All right, so everybody, next off the next two, I'll be putting up stuff anyway. I'll have probably I didn't do a weather in 5 video today. Took a little bit of a break, but probably do one tomorrow and Saturday, and
Can
weather
you
in a
ring
minute.
the bell? We got to 111
Unlike
likes tonight.
that's good, and we'll be back Sunday night at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time, New Year's Eve. Uh, so before the drink, you know, for those of you who imbibe, hold off until after the show, or maybe during the show. I don't know, because I won't be drinking. Actually, we're not supposed to be drinking while we're on the air, uh, and we won't. So we'll see you on Sunday. Okay? Have a good
Have a good
night.
one, folks.